help me welcoming Joe Prota, who is a very important, but more importantly, very nice person doing brand on a global level at IBM. And he went the extra mile and brought with him something about what he's doing with AI at IBM. So we have the pleasure of seeing someone not talking about what AI could be doing, but someone who is doing AI. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, Gordon. Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little about what you're doing with AI? Because I'm honestly failing at doing stuff with AI. So I'd love to see how it's being done at the big stage.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is still figuring out how to use this, and it's changing so rapidly that what was done yesterday is probably already out of date, and there's probably something new and innovative. But very recently, we did. IBM has a very long-standing partnership with Adobe, and we obviously they're doing some great work with AI with their Firefly product and a number of their other products. And as marketers, we have a really and in advertising, we have a really cool opportunity to take advantage of that. But the risk is it doesn't meet your brand standards or brand safety. So if I'm IBM and I, use it to create an ad and it pulls in something with Microsoft's colors or or if it brings in an old tagline from Apple, that's probably a bad thing. For my career, it's probably a bad thing for both brands. Nobody really wants that. And so that's something you have to watch out for. Now, IBM has some great solutions that help prevent that. And so when you combine that work, what IBM's capabilities are with something like Firefly, you can create something really magical for a brand. So I wanted to tell that story, but I also wanted to live it. I wanted to use AI to develop something as we were telling that story. And that process is what really excites me and something that I'm trying to do more of. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today. And I'll share it with everybody right now.
And if you're joining us on Spotify or Apple, this is where you should be going to YouTube to see some of the lovely pictures too.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful abomination that was created with AI of a hamster that looks like a goldfish. And this is like the perfect embodiment of what excites me about using AI in marketing and advertising right now. This fish, you can see, it is kind of a near perfect creation. It looks flawless. Everything from the hair sort of the goldfish, of the hamster, looking as if it's floating in the ocean, to the beautiful translucent fins on this bizarre but adorable little hamster fish. And this was created with AI. And when I think about the creative development process, I think there's sort of two parts of it, right? There is landing on your big idea and coming up with what is going to be your campaign. And then there's sort of executing that. Once you know what your big concept is, once you know what it's going to look like visually, and you understand your key message, all of that. Once that's sort of established, then okay, it's going to become a billboard, or it's going to become a TV spot, or it's going to become whatever. You can kind of start to bang that out a little bit. And that first phase of creative development, it takes a lot of twists and turns. It's not necessarily linear. You might start in one place and then suddenly land in another, and you have all your internal reviews, whether it's with, if you're on the agency side, you have your client reviews. If you're on the client side, you have your stakeholder reviews. And so it's this big kind of beautifully messy process. And so the question is, right? Can you speed that up? How can you get that done faster? And that's where AI can come into play. And that's what we did with this concept. And to tell our story of this partnership between IBM and Adobe and what IBM's products can do. We decided we were going to tell it during Adobe Summit earlier this year in Las Vegas. And our concept was to turn the sphere in Las Vegas into a giant fishbowl. And we filled that fishbowl
It's
with
one of those ideas, once you see it, you wonder, of course, why did no one else did it before? Like it's the most natural thing.
Yeah, it is. And the sphere, I got to tell you, I don't think pictures do it justice. When
Yeah,
I saw it in person, it's kind of like fireworks. When fireworks go off, people just stop and they look at it. And the sphere is sort of the same way. It's you just stop and you just look at it. It's
yeah.
truly it's enormous and it's just breathtaking to see. And some of the things that brands have done with it are extraordinary. And to be honest, that added a little bit of pressure where at a conference, I have this incredible medium that not a lot of people have done work with, but the bar is high, and you're taking it over at a conference that's filled with marketers and creative people. So we really had to do a good job with this, and I'm proud of where we landed. Anyway, so going back to the idea, we're going to turn we're going to turn the sphere into a giant fish bowl, and we're going to fill it with all of these fish that are a visual metaphor for things that can go wrong with AI. And we
Yeah.
used AI to develop these fish. So you have one that looks like a hamster, and you have one that looks like it's kind of the solid piece of gold. You have one that looks like, I don't know, maybe Picasso could have drawn it a long time ago. There's all these really bizarre looking fish. And we're telling the story of going from wrong to right. You see all of these fish that are wrong, and then suddenly you would see them sort of disappear and evaporate until there's one fish that is undeniably the right fish that is left. And you'll see it disappear. And what the message that shows up is trust what you create, IBM and Adobe. And so it's meant to sort of lean into and bring to life that question that everybody is grappling with. I see the potential in AI, but can I trust it with my brand? Can I trust it to bring to life the things that I need? And so
I
we're
think
really
this is really good because I mean, my first contact with AI while still being employed was literally, it was a brilliant concept. Everyone loved it within the first second, and execution also was really quick. And then it just simply over a month failed because of legal issues that couldn't be solved.
exactly.
So I think addressing a really good point, and
Exactly.
it looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Again, if you're on Spotify, go to YouTube.
Yeah. So maybe this can be our thumbnail for the episode,
Yeah,
Gordon.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so anyway, so yeah, it told the story really well. But like I said, we used AI to create all of this and to
Mhm.
take that kind of twisting and turning creative development process that is normally really time consuming and difficult and try and accelerate it. And so we used AI to get to all of these fish. So we worked with agency partners and at Ogilvy, and we worked with a wonderful production company named Murata, and then our internal team as well, my team, and we developed these sort of characters. Each fish was a different character. And normally when you're doing that, you'd have art directors pulling swipe to say, okay, this is what I sort of think this character is going to look like. Or if you still have some people out there that have some just good old fashioned drawing skills, like they're going to draw something up. Okay.
Yeah,
And you think about how this goes. They draw up 15 concepts or they pull swipe for 15 concepts, and it goes to the creative director, and the creative director whittles it down, and then it comes to the client, and then the client changes it. And when you're doing that manually or with an army of people, that takes time. That could take
yeah.
weeks, could take months, right? You've worked on the agency side, it is time consuming. Here, it took days, took hours, and that's what was really extraordinary. So they kind of this first step of this was to think about the concept, okay, or the idea. I want one character that looks like a hamster combined with a goldfish, and that's going to represent AI drift. right?
I
Cool.
I would have loved to sit in these meetings.
Yeah.
Oh man.
And, in real time, they plug it in and all of a sudden it's like, boom. And so now here it is. And we see six different options and we're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I get it. I see where that's going to go. Let's go with this one. And so like here you just see it and like all these different, I think what's cool about it is when you say, I want to see a fish that looks like, a hamster combined with a goldfish, AI is going to generate, or Firefly is going to generate not just one version. It generates four different versions, five different versions. And you're like, okay, this one of the five is kind of the closest to what I have in mind, right? The art director will say, that's the one that I have in my mind's eye. Creative director will say, okay, I understand. And the client will say, yes, no, maybe so. But we were able to see so many versions of this on the client side. I was able to see so many versions of these in a couple of days versus weeks, which, like I said, it goes through the steps of approval on the agency side before it gets to me, that we got to our final idea so much faster than we ever did before. And it doesn't take the person out of it, right? There's still a human being who has this idea that's prompting the AI. It's just a tool that's allowing them to get to approval, or that sounds very corporate of me, but it's allowing them to get to their
Yeah.
vision much, much faster. And all of that is great.
And I'm with you. It reminds me when I started, it was kind of like the first rounds of Photoshop. And I mean, what did Photoshop do? Make things faster and make them more stunning.
Exactly.
And
So
this is what this, I mean, and why wouldn't you want to look at hamster fishes all day? I mean,
yeah. So here we go. So that's step one, right?
yeah,
What is in my mind's eye, and I'm going to have AI generate that for me faster than having to sketch it or pull swipe and then come to an agreement on these characters that we wanted to create.
yeah.
Now, step two was crafting the details, and I personally didn't expect AI to be able to do this, but when you're in this phase, right? One of our fish,
Oh God,
yeah,
I'm
one
going
of
to
our fish
devour this.
Yeah,
You have a
one of our
cracked
fish.
fish,
Yeah, one
a
of our fish
goldfish.
looked like one of our fish looked like a disco ball, which was awesome. It was really, that's where we drew inspiration from.
Yeah.
Or should I? And I thought it was great. Now, when you think about the details of this, what the art directors that I partnered with looked at, they saw what AI generated, and they were like, okay, we all agreed, okay, cool. One of them's going to look like a hamster, one of them's going to look like a disco ball, one of them's going to look like a cloud of smoke. Okay, so for the disco ball, then the art director said, well, let's have AI refine this a little bit, or I'm going to use AI to refine this a little bit. I think the scales need to be a little brighter. They need to be a little shinier. And I think the iridescence of the fins need to be a little bit different than they are now. And so they prompted the AI to refine the details of the fish. Again, just accelerating the creative development process. It requires an art director to have that eye. I'd love to say that I was the one who was pushing them to make the scales more shiny, but that's not my skill set, and that's not what I'm evaluating the merits of this idea on. But you have an art director who's able to look at it and then use this tool to accelerate that process. And I just get to be the benefactor of that. I just get to see this and say, wow, it's an incredible concept. Let's do it. So that's step number two. You're now refining the idea. And then you get into step number three, where you need to take it and take what AI has generated for you and refine it for the medium and to make sure that it is perfectly calibrated for your brand. So if Firefly was trained, for example, on your brand standards, which is where IBM would come in, it would get a little bit closer. But in this case, I'm also taking what Firefly has created and I need to put it on the sphere, which are these huge 3D rendered files. And so Firefly got us to that place in honestly days versus weeks, so much faster than it would have. Now, the rest of the production process required people to come back into the process or to take more ownership within the process. They had never left it, but it requires people to come in. And so now they're creating the trajectory of the fish, how it's swimming within the bowl and within this 3D environment, how its scales move, how it looks like it's floating, all of these incredible little details. But again, to get to that point happened way faster. And I know that it was a relief for the creative teams that we were working with. And even if you think about the handoff between the concept and the production vendor, right? Here, in this instance, the concept could have been a whole bunch of swipe, it could have been a whole bunch of illustrations, and then it's on a lot of pressure falls onto that production designer to create it, right? In this instance, they were handing them the exact thing that they wanted them to animate, and that's pretty great. It allows for a smoother transition. It allows things to go faster. It allows for more collaboration between the designer and the production designer so that they can say, oh, I really get what you're trying to create here. Let me go off and think about how I can make this fish float in this 3D environment and still look the way you've designed it, but feel even more like a fish or like whatever motion we're trying for it to replicate.
When you're describing it, also feels like you're cutting down the distance between the idea that what you want and executing it, and that makes it faster and lets you try out more ideas. From what you're describing, that sounds absolutely as creative as it gets.
Bad joke. Would you say it's exciting? Does it sound exciting?
Absolutely. I
mean, yeah, I couldn't help myself
and
there.
It's not a bad joke. I mean, the longer I do this, the more I realize, well, what gets me exciting is what gets me into this business. So I mean, I'm not a visual person, but what you just showed is like an absolute eye pleasure. And why wouldn't you do this?
Yeah. So it was great. So that's what excites me right now, what we're working on. We're looking for more ways to do this within our process. And I know that there are more, this is what so many people on the brand side, and I think even within the agency world, are looking at. How can they use these new tools to augment and accelerate the craft and skill sets they already have? It's a really exciting time.
It also feels like what you're describing. I mean, if you spend too much time on LinkedIn like I do, it's easy to get bogged down in, oh God, it's all going down the drain, yada yada yada, all complicated. Oh, back in the good old days. What you showed and described feels like it's bringing back an element of playfulness and speed into the whole thing. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, you know,
honestly,
you have those there's that old idea that like the best idea was or this old notion that the best ideas were sort of done on the back of a cocktail napkin, right? I think that's going to come back because rather than sketching something when the inspiration strikes you on the back of a cocktail napkin, you can prompt AI and get it. And then you can go and you can show that to whomever, or you could develop it further, and you'll just be that much further along. And somebody will be able to, I think, understand your vision more easily. And that's a wonderful thing.
God, absolutely. So what are you looking for next to? I mean, given that you are probably 1 or 2 steps ahead of most of us right now already, what's next thing for you? What do you want to do next with it, from it, or something different?
I want to do, I think that what everybody is searching for, myself included, is how do I do this regularly? How do I just make this a normal part of what I do every day in our creative development process? And this case was really special, and we learned so much from it. It was I want to kind of practice what I preach, right? So I'm lucky to work for a company that has been doing AI for a very long time and has products that that can help marketers and help many, many aspects of business. But in this case, it was like we have a product that can help marketers use AI and trust it, right? And when you combine that with Firefly, it's a really powerful offering from IBM and Adobe. So I was lucky there, and I said, okay, well, if I'm gonna really tell everybody to trust what you create, I need to know that I can do it myself. I want to
Yeah.
practice it myself, right? I want to walk the walk. Now I'm looking for ways to regularly infuse this into what I do. And the reason why we haven't just simply gone off and done it after the success of what we did with Adobe is because the creative development process is kind of different every time, right? Like your
Yeah.
company, the challenges and goals of your company change, your message change, and therefore the way you go to market might change a little bit. And so you have the creative development process is tried and true, but where and how you apply AI to it to accelerate that might be different each time. And
Yeah.
I think if you just allow it to be, if you just rely on it to do this for you every single time, you sort of suck the creativity out of it. Your strategy might,
Ah,
right? The strategy might not be quite as precise as it used to be. You're always going to look at, okay, what's the human
yeah.
emotion? What are the drivers in the market right now? How are people behaving? And then how do I create an idea that'll resonate? If you just rely on AI to sort of like pump out something for you, it might not necessarily hit the mark or resonate with people the way that this did. This was really rooted in a very
Yes.
powerful insight, which is what
Yeah.
you called out before, right? So that's why it worked so
It's
well. And
rooted in
why
my, yeah. I mean, it's rooted in my experience of legal issues. Yeah, good point. Good point.
right? So it's
So,
rooted in a powerful insight, and that's why the creative idea was so strong. I want to make sure that I have that every time,
yeah,
and that AI is now a part of our workbench, and that we just a tool we pull out more often.
yeah, agree. So, besides the work you've been involved in, what do you think is one of the, or your most, the piece of work out there that you think is most exciting right now?
Oh, I don't think this is advertising. I think this is more just meeting people where they are. And it's the Olympics. I
Yeah,
think the way I am loving the Olympics.
yeah,
I can't stop watching it, but I think the way that NBC, or at least in America, it's all you get all the content through NBC, and they really leaned into their app. And so I can see any sport I want at any time. It's not, normally I remember growing up as a kid watching the Olympics,
yeah,
and you turned it on, and what was on TV was on TV. And so while I was interested in seeing, you know, seeing archery, if basketball was on, I was watching basketball. And maybe I read about it in the newspaper. Now, I watch it with my kids, and you pull it up, and it's like this huge menu of every single sport. And my son's
yeah,
like, Dad, let's put on judo. Okay, now, and then 2 minutes later, after we see who won, he's like, okay, let's jump over and see archery and rifling. And so I think that that's pretty extraordinary, and it's really fun to watch. And I think that was a very smart thing that NBC did, at least in the US, to sort of say, okay, this is how people are consuming things. And there is this huge range of interest across everything. And we're going to give people access to all of it so they can watch it when they want and how they want. And they still have their programming, which is great. And they've done a nice job from a production standpoint, but I can watch how I want, and that's great.
and I couldn't agree more. I mean, my kids are both doing sports that isn't high on any media, like they're playing field hockey. But you can watch it and you can see your idols, and they're two strange things. On the one hand, it increases the intensity because you watch the stuff you normally don't watch and you can flip in. But somehow, and I think there's something about how they also the look of the Olympics this time, it doesn't it still holds together as one. And I think that's a beautiful thing that they achieved. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah, totally
great.
agree.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was incredible. As usual, I learned the most. Thank you for sharing the work. And most importantly, thank you for doing the work, because the more often this kind of things happen out there, the better for all of us, I guess. Thank you,
Awesome.
Joe.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. This was great.
Thank you.